Okay, so we're going to do the net present value data analysis problem. So let's open this one up. And this is actually a tricky one. Um, I say that because this is probably my fifth time trying to record it, and every time I've just been missing like a comma or something in the formula. So we'll look at this. We have in the Excel sheet, we have a number of potential investments to the desired rate of return, the cost for the investment. We have 10 years worth of expected value that we'll get, and then the residual from this investment. So say in this equipment 29, right? We will get value in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have zero residual at the end of year 4. Okay. We could look at this machine 22, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of useful life out of machine 22, and at the end of 5 years, there's $5,180 worth of residual left. So let's look what it's asking us to do. So R1, enter a formula that results in total undiscounted future cash flows using the data in row 4. So if we look at each year, we have this cash flow, but we want to add up what is our cash flows for all of it. So year 1 through 10 plus the residual. And so this is easy. This is just a sum function. And we sum up all of this. Now this is an undiscounted cash flow. And so it just tells us if we just add up the amount of cash each year, what will we get back? Okay? And so we can look at that. Now we know that in real life, $5,000 in 10 years is not worth the same as $5,000 today. I'd rather have $5,000 today rather than waiting 10 years. So we want to discount each of these back to year 0. Now there's a number of different ways we could do this. So first of all, we could go through and we could do the present value function for each year and look at the present value of year 1, present value of year 2, and do this present value function over and over. And to do that, we'd say, okay, year 1, it's 8%, right? And then it's year 1, and it's, well, we're not having payments. Payments are for annuities, so we do a second comma, and then we do the future value in year 1. And that tells us, okay, this is worth, this $34,380 in 1 year is worth $31,833. We'd actually do the absolute value because we like positive numbers here. Okay, and so we could do that, and then we would add to it plus the absolute value of the present value, and we do year 2, so 8%, comma, year 2, comma, comma, and then the future value, and we do that. Oops, I forgot that in parentheses. Okay, and so now we know year 1 plus year 2, if we went back to year 0, this is how much it's worth. Right, so it's worth $58,000. Now we could do that in our formula and add it up, do the same thing year 3, year 4, year 5, all the way through 10, and then do it again for the residual. That's possible. What we're going to do instead, because I think it's a lot easier, we're going to use the net present value function. Use the net present value, and we put in the rate, and then we can just highlight, and it automatically assumes you start at year 1, okay, and then we go all the way to year 10, okay, and so that gives us the current value of year 1 through 10 all added together. Now we can't do that for the residual. So for the residual, we actually have to add that in. So we add in the absolute value of the present value, okay, of this at 8%. Well, here it's my percent in C4, right? Comma. Now I need to know how many years, right? So I want the number of years that I actually had something happening, right? So for my first one, it's 10 years, right? But what about my second one? I only want it to be 4 years because that's the 4 years of useful life. So I will use the COUNTIF function, okay? And so the COUNTIF, I can select a range, so I'll select all 10 years, right? And then I want to check if it's greater than 0, and that'll tell me how many years had a return greater than 0. And that's what I want to use as my years of useful life. Okay? Now I have 0 annuity value every year, and so I'm going to do 2 commas, and then I'll do the future value is my residual. Okay, and now I make sure I get my right number of parentheses, And so here's my amount. Now, you will notice that my residual is 0. So this is going to be the same as just my net present value of the first 10 years because my residual is 0. But in later years where I have a residual, they won't be the same, right? So this part where it's absolute value of present value of all this is just calculating the residuals value right now. Okay? And you have to use the absolute value. That's important because the net present value function will return a positive number and the present value function returns a negative number, and so you want to make sure that they're both positive, and so you just use the absolute value. Okay. So we do that. I'm going to check it. It's always good to check it, right, before you get too far. Great. Okay, the next one, the net cash flow. This one's easy, right? So the net cash flow is simply equal, it's what your inflows are minus what you paid for the machinery. Okay, and so that's an easy one. Mine, it's a negative number, right? So I'm going to have to actually put the negative sign in manually. Okay, cool. Now, cell S4, use the if function to return either a yes or a no to state whether the investment should be considered further using the data. Okay, so I go in over here, and I'm just going to say if it's greater than 0, it's a yes. Okay, so if my net cash flow is greater than 0, comma, I give me a yes. Okay, otherwise, give me a no. Presto. Yeah, check that. I know it's going to be correct. Okay. So now I can copy these all the way down. Boop. And I can create my pivot table. Hopefully you're all getting really good at creating pivot tables at this point. Okay, let's look over here. Q1, what percentage of the investments should be considered further? So I want to know how many I have as are yeses. Right, so I can look at the investments and see how many are yeses. Now, there's lots of ways you could figure this out. I'm just going to put a consider further into my rows so I can have like a yes and a no. And then I will do a count of my investments that fall in each one of those. And so that's nice and simple, right? And so then as a percentage, I can do equals yes divided by the total, right? And it gives me a 43%. Okay, so 43.48. Put this in here. I notice it says 1 decimal place, so I round that up. There we go. Okay, Q2, how many investments with a desired rate of return of 11% had cash flows for 7 years? Okay, so what are we going to put in here? So we have a filter for 11%, and we want to know how many have cash flows for exactly 7 years. Okay, so there's a couple different ways I could handle this. So, get rid of all this. So I know I'm going to have a desired rate of return as a filter. So that's easy. Okay? And so I can say I only want to look at 11% because that's what mine said. And I want to know how many had, how many investments had 7 years. Okay, so now I can see all of my investments with a desired rate of return of 11. I can see how many had 7 years. And I want to know how many, but they didn't have 8. So they had cash flows for exactly 7 years. So I could look at this and I could say, okay, and I could go across and could say, here's 1, here's 2. Right? So that's an easy way to do it. Another way I could do it is maybe if I just put this, my 7-year and 8-year in its filters, right? And I could say, okay, I want all of the ones that were non-zero for year 7 and were exactly 0 for year 8. And presto, now it just shows me I filtered desired rate of return of 11%, has a value for year 7, has a 0 for year 8, and these are the 2 pieces of equipment. So there we go. So my answer is going to be 2. Okay. Q3. What is the difference between the present value of equipment 29's 4-year cash flow if the desired rate of return had 8% rather than 9%? Okay. So I'm going to show you, like in real life, what I would probably do. and then we'll talk about how you can do it with a pivot table. So in real life, I'd probably just create a new sheet, and I'd go into my data, and I'm saying equipment 29. Okay, so let's go down. Here's equipment 29. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go into sheet 2. Okay, I'm going to paste it. Okay, and I can look at this. I actually probably need my heading as well, just so I know what I'm talking about. Right, so I paste it in here, and I say, okay, what is my return right here? Okay, and I'm just gonna copy this in. So copy, paste it. So that's 9%, and then I say, okay, if it was 8% rather than 9%. So if I just change this to 8%, and now I can look at how. Oh, did it not do my calculation for me? The sum. Oh wait, it did. Okay. So here it is. So I can look. Here's my net cash flow. So I can just look at the difference. Equals this minus this. So the difference is going to be 9,870. So that's what I would do. I would just create a new sheet. And I didn't even use the pivot table there. So you could use the pivot table and then just do the same thing and calculate in the pivot table. But it's so much easier just to create a new sheet, copy that one line, and you already have all the calculations in there. So you just change your investment. Okay, pivot table, you do the same thing. You would just, here I'll show you what to do on the pivot table. But you don't have the formula in the pivot table, right? So we'd have to go in the pivot table. And we would put all of our stuff in here. Residual. We're filtering by investment, I guess. What was I was investment. Equipment 29. Okay, and it's at 9%. And then what I would do is I'd take the formula that I did before and I'd say, okay, equals net present value of at this rate, comma, these 4 years, plus the present value of this amount, present value at this rate, comma, this amount, present value at 4, comma, this amount, right? And it gives me that. I don't want it as a percentage, I want it as a dollar. Okay, and then I would do the same thing. I would copy this, copy, and I paste into this next one. Instead of using that, I would use 8%. Oops. And 8% equals this minus this. Okay. Same number, 9,870. Right? And so I could do it this way with the pivot table. But honestly, all the pivot table did is it just gave me the same information that I already had in my data sheet. And so it was easier for me just to copy it in and use my existing calculation. Okay, let's see. How many of the investments have a positive net cash flow over this amount, 24,700, and a desired rate of return of 9 or 10%? So I filter for 9 or 10%, and then I just have to see which ones have a positive cash flow that's greater than this amount. So let's look at it. If we go back to our pivot table. Okay. We don't need investments. We need the desired rate of return here. What else are we looking for? How many of the investments have a positive net cash flow over 24,700? Okay, so we need the net cash flow. Okay, so first we change our filter. We use 9 or 10%. I don't want to filter by the equipment anymore because I'm looking at all of them, and I want to know how many have a positive net cash flow over 24,700. Okay, how do I do this? Well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the count if. So equals count if, because we're doing lots of count if, and I'm going to select this whole column. Okay, comma, greater than, there you go. So that was my whole formula. It gave me 11. Great. So I hope this was helpful for everyone, and we're reaching the end of the semester. This is exciting. Have a wonderful day, and enjoy doing stuff with Excel. Thank you.